Hey guys, happy Thursday. So here we are, sort of in the middle of Module 5. And I just wanted to check in this week, make sure everyone is doing well, and to encourage you if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Um, I think wherever you are this past week looks like it's been sort of warm. So hopefully things will start cooling down wherever you're at. Here in the Pacific Northwest, it's been a little bit warm, but we're uh, hopefully we back down into normal temperatures here by the weekend. And our normal temperature this time of year is mid 80s. So hopefully that's where we will be. So I'll be happy when that happens. So hopefully things will calm down a little bit where you're at. Um, but anyhow, this past week, I just want to talk about what we did in Module 4 and then where we're going in Module 5. So again, Module 4, the big assignment, the paper, had you exploring um, the case from Texas on sanctuary cities and how the state of Texas was trying to um, make sure, for lack of a better word, that the local and state law enforcement agencies were cooperating with federal authorities regarding immigration issues. Those illegal immigrants who were in custody or that they arrested that might be subject or eligible for deportation, depending on how the federal authorities deemed it. And so you began to look at that a little bit because there were some cities in Texas, some big cities in Texas that were proclaiming to be sanctuary cities. And so they were going to limit the ability of their local law enforcement to work with federal agencies, especially those involved in immigrations and custom enforcement or ICE. Right. So that was the basis of this assignment, and you researched it, researching Senate Bill 4, which basically was this law in Texas. Um, there are a couple of things I want you to take away in terms of focus for that assignment. Number one was how agencies work together. Normally, under normal circumstances, um, law enforcement agencies often work together. Um, not all not all information is shared equally, but nonetheless, this idea of cooperation. So remember, law enforcement as a federal, state, and local function, right? And each of these has a different area of responsibility. In other words, different jurisdictions. And your jurisdiction is what's going to give you your authority to do certain things. And the big issue here with Texas and sanctuary cities is this whole idea of whose job it is to enforce immigration laws. And that was the focus. Part of it was uh, many sanctuary cities believe that that duty and responsibility lies with the federal government, and they did not want their local law enforcement officers engaged in that type of activity for a series of reasons. And even police chiefs would tell you that one of the big reasons is to make sure that your community has trust in you, because we need people to come forward as victims and witnesses to crimes and to report crimes with the understanding that we at the local level, we don't really care of your immigration status, right? Now we do care, obviously, if you break the law. Remember, sanctuary cities is not a free pass, sort of. If you violate the law and you're in the country legally or illegally, you'll go through the system just like anybody else. And whether or not you end up with an ICE detainer depends on how the whole process is going to play out. And that's going to vary from place to place on the level of cooperation. And that's really not what I want to spend time with here. But just know it's about how agencies work together. And then the courts are the same way. I mean, we have federal courts and we have state courts. And federal courts obviously are involved in those cases in which federal law has been violated or there's a violation of the U.S. Constitution, for example, the Bill of Rights. Local or state courts are involved in violations of state law, local ordinances, and then also state constitutions. And so that also becomes an issue with jurisdiction and the ability of one type of court to hear a specific type of case. That's what we call subject matter jurisdiction, right? So when you're talking about immigration, federal courts have immigration courts. They have subject matter jurisdiction over immigration cases. So you're not going to find immigration cases in state court because state courts don't have jurisdiction, right? So that was one of the other key takeaways, was the idea of jurisdiction. And then finally, you had to look at, how they actually work together. How does law enforcement and courts work together, even in sanctuary cities? And so you saw some of that in the video where ICE agents were out doing their thing without any assistance from local agencies, right? Because they had their warrants for specific individuals. And they talked about some of the issues they were facing, how it'd be easier if local authorities would let them know when somebody's going to be released so they can arrest them at the courts, not at the courts or the jails, versus trying to hunt these people down from their homes or their place of employment and so forth. So you got a different flavor as to what they were thinking. But remember, from the local level, local police often have a much more intimate relationship with the public than federal authorities. Most of you will have contact with either local or state law enforcement or your local courts. Very few of you will ever have somebody from the FBI knocking on your front door, or very few of you will ever find yourself in federal court. So most of our interactions with the criminal justice system is at the local level. And so the local level officials, local police, need to maintain and build that level of public trust so that people, whether legal or illegal, are willing to call to report crime, to become witnesses of crime. If you're a victim of crime, you're willing to come forward and then go through that whole process that requires you to go to court and give testimony. And so people need to feel secure that local authorities and local courts aren't going to somehow hold them for some type of immigration violation or something to that effect, right? And so I think that's one of the big issues that we have to contend with when we talk about local sanctuary cities and sanctuary states and the relationship that local law enforcement has within the community. Okay, so that was some of the big takeaways there. I know the article probably wasn't 100% helpful, but hopefully it gave you an idea as to the process that took place. All right, the state of Texas created a law. Several cities that were sanctuary cities believed that that law, as written, violated the First and 14th Amendment of certain government officials, including elected officials. And so they challenged the law on that basis. And there were some other issues that were associated with the lawsuit as well. And the case went to the federal district courts. The federal district courts made a ruling. The ruling was appealed to the Fifth Circuit, which is the United States Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which includes, amongst other states, Texas. And that court pretty much ruled in favor of the Texas law with some variation. They found some things to be questionable and not constitutional, so those were thrown out. But overall, the meat and potatoes of the law seem to be passed. And then as you read through the newspaper, or the newspaper article, you realize that, the impact was sort of minimal. The number of cases in which an officer asked someone their immigration status was very small. And so you sort of get a sense for how that is, because remember, a lot of this stuff there's going to be some level of discretion at the line officer level in how he's going to approach something, whether or not he's even going to ask that particular question. Okay, so anyhow, I hope you got something out of it. It's probably one of the more difficult assignments we have in terms of trying to put it all together. So I've been reviewing those this week, and overall you guys are doing a good job. I think you get the idea of the issue of jurisdiction and the importance of the interaction between the law enforcement and the courts as cases move along, and so forth. Okay. In Module 5 this week, you're working on your first project, and many of the critical elements you've already discussed in one format or another, and some of it might have been in your discussion board assignments, or it might have been in a previous writing assignment. So you're looking at and explaining the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the rule of law. We've talked about all of these. I offered you some notes from my previous lectures, so you can look at those as a refresher. And then we also went back and looked at the Fourth, Sixth, and Eighth Amendment, which is something you just recently did. Uh, Again, you're offering a real-world example of when rights under this amendment might not be guaranteed. And so, for example, if you select the Fourth Amendment, an area where your right to unreasonable searches and seizures does not apply, for example, is border searches. So if you've ever traveled out of the country and you come back into the country, Customs has the ability to search you and your luggage. Usually they'll develop some reason to do that because obviously they're trained individuals and looking for certain things as people move through the lines, but just know that they have the ability to toss your luggage anytime. So there's no expectation of privacy. You can't make a Fourth Amendment claim that they didn't have probable cause. So that's one of those cases where your Fourth Amendment rights aren't there, right? And there's a couple others. And a lot of these are discussed in the textbook. These are sort of the exceptions to the rule, right? And then you also have to provide a list of examples, and examples is plural, so at least 3 to 5 like we did in the previous assignment, where the actions of a criminal justice professional may be restricted. And again, one example might be a scope of the search. So for example, if police are going to search for a stolen car in my garage, they will write a warrant to search my garage, and they want to look for and seize a specific car. That warrant, if written just to have access to my garage, doesn't allow them to enter my home and search parts of my house, because that's beyond the scope of the search. So that's sort of where the Fourth Amendment can limit the ability of a criminal justice professional in conducting his or her job. So that's just a little snippet there. Okay. Anyhow, we are in week 5, so we are just a little bit past the halfway point. So you guys are doing a great job. There's a lot of work in this class, and I understand that. Every week is busy. So I appreciate it. We will continue to move through each of the modules here in the next coming weeks. Start taking a preview to look at what's coming ahead, so you'll have an idea. We have a very active Module 8, so keep that in mind as you begin to plan ahead. Okay, so you can go in and start looking at what's coming up in Module 8. We have a couple assignments that still need to be taken care of in Module 8. All right. So again, thank you guys. You're doing a lot of good work. The summer session sometimes can be hard because people get busy wanting to go out and do vacation things, or at least get outside more often. So I do appreciate everyone's hard work and diligence. All right. Anything else at all, never hesitate to call. I'm around pretty much all the time. All right. So thank you guys, and have a great Module 5 week. And I look forward to reading your projects next week. Bye.